Good evening, everybody. We'll kick off this meeting of the EPH committee. A little bit of admin to start with. Fire evacuation procedures, because we have one or two people here that have yet to hear them. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exits are located at the rear and the side of this room. Go down the stairs and we meet in the Memorial Park. Please note this meeting is being webcast live on the internet, and we have confirmed that. Please could all members and public to switch off their phones or turn to silent. And we'll kick on through the agenda. Apologies for absence and substitutions. I've got one notified substitution. That is Councillor James, Gavin James is being substituted by your good self, Councillor Parker. Thank you very much. Are there any other changes to that? Are there any declarations of interest on the items on the agenda this evening, please? Thank you. An appointment of Vice Chairman to this committee. Do I have any nominations for that post of Vice Chairman? Councillor Cubitt, thank you very much. Do I have a proposer?
I would like to propose Councillor Cubitt for that position.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Parker. Seconded by Councillor Parker. Are we all agreed to that nomination and proposition and seconded? Thank you very much. Councillor Cubitt, I'd like to invite you to take the chair next to me, please. And thank you, committee. There are no urgent matters before us this evening. I'd like to go on to the minutes of the committee meetings held on the 20th and 23rd of July 2015. The easiest way to do this, I will go through it page by page as paper A on the report, on the agenda, on the report. And we'll go through page 4 of 97. Are there any comments on that page? It's a matter of accuracy. 5 of 97. 6 of 97. Are you agreed that I can sign that minutes of that meeting on the 20th? Thank you. Move to page 7 of 97. And any comments on the meeting of July 23rd? Page 8 of 97, 9 of 97, 10 of 97, and 11 of 97. No comments. I will duly sign the minutes as accurate record of the meetings. I'll sign those in a minute. Okay. Now, slight change in the order of where we're addressing items on the agenda this evening. Because we have a visiting presenter for the draft cycling strategy and a visiting member of the public who would like to address the committee on the cycling strategy, I'm going to take that item first, and that will be followed by the SIL levy update. So we'll move to the draft cycling strategy, and I'll turn it over to the portfolio holder, Councillor Mark Raffel, who will introduce the report, and that will be followed by the officer.
Chairman, I'm very pleased to be bringing this report to this committee. Back in February of this year, I went to officers and said to them that I was concerned that there wasn't an active cycling strategy that was in place. I observed that, having been a councillor for 13 years, there just simply was no proactive strategy in place, and it was about time we did something about it. As someone who cycles myself, with a family that cycles, as someone who observes numerous cyclists out and about and recognises the increasing popularity of cycling, I thought that we as a borough could improve cycling as something that many people enjoy and want to do as part of their lives. This strategy is not a crusade to get everyone on a bicycle, but it is a campaign to remove some of the obstacles that prevent those who want to cycle from cycling. I want the borough to be known as pro-cycling, positive for cyclists. By being pro, I don't mean being anti something else. This is administration, I would say, is pro-cycling, pro-car, pro-motorcycle, pro-horses, and of course pro-pedestrian. This is not a strategy that will sit on a shelf gathering dust, on the shelf labelled good intentions sometime in the past. This is a strategy that I want brought back to this committee annually with a report setting out what has been achieved and what continues to need to be achieved. Our borough is growing. Our infrastructure demands are potentially increasing, but they're certainly going to be changing. And with that, the demands that will fall upon those who want to cycle, and the cycling infrastructure will need to be addressed regularly and kept up to date. We clearly can't change things for the better overnight. Likewise, it may take some time to find the finance to do some of the more major projects, and the strategy takes into account the fact that some things may be easier to remedy in the short term, some things will be in the longer term, and some will be in between. What I want is the objectives in the strategy to be realistically achievable, and I want them to be measurable. And I will value the assistance of councillors here if they examine that, namely the objectives, whether they're reasonable, and whether they are realistically measurable. I have already told those involved in all of this that what I want to happen from this point onwards is that the existing level of cycling to be remeasured, measured from the basis of routes that currently are popular for cycling, rather than necessarily some of the measures that are in place at the moment, which may be on routes that are never going to be popular for cycling. And so we have an objective level that we work from, and then we measure that realistically over a period of time. I have met, well, the officers have met, and I have attended some of the open days that have been held as part of the consultation developing this strategy, and I've met again with the cycling groups, some of them since this report has been written, to make sure that we've broadly covered and addressed the issues that they've been raising so far, so that at every step of the way this is going to be a cyclist strategy as well as a borough strategy. It's not going to be written from the armchair, it's going to be written from the saddle as well. We believe that the benefits of more people choosing to cycle in order to complete their journeys is self-evident. And for those of you who may need some persuasion, and I hope then they are few, if at all none, I notice one member isn't here, in terms of car congestion, in terms of the reduction in car pollution, the benefits to the health and well-being of those who are able to cycle. Naturally within this we appreciate that this isn't for everyone, but it could be for a lot more people than it is at the moment. It is also cheaper, and it has economic benefits to cycle rather than paying for parking and other transport costs. And it is convenient because of course it allows people to travel from door to door. And so as a borough, I want us to be proactive rather than continuing the passive stance that has perhaps been the routine for the last 12, 13 years. So there's quite a lot to look at. This is to go out to consultation. So your thoughts at this moment will be valued, but I hope you realise that whilst I know that some of you are keen cyclists, and so for your continuing support and input will be valued now, I hope you realise that we have had the cyclists in at the first stage, and we will continue to do so as we go forwards. Can I hand over to Mark Lambert, who may want to say a few words as to the others that are here.
Good evening, members. I'd just like to say a few words to add to what Councillor Raffel has said, and also to introduce Nick Farthing from Sustrans, who we've commissioned to undertake the work for us and to develop the strategy and the map. Councillor Raffel's already given quite a detailed introduction to the paper, but I just wanted to flag up that we see this as a really important first step in developing a strategy and the actions that sit behind it. So to emphasise that really we see this in moving forward in more detail from here really. And on that note, I'll pass over to Nick, who can talk you through the work he's undertaken.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Councillor Raffel. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. My name is Nick Farthing. I'm the area manager for Sustrans. I do have a car. I do catch the train. I do cycle or get the bus. I try and travel when it's relevant to what I'm doing on the day. So, and Sustrans, we're not anti-car. So, and as members have said before, this is not an alternative. This is to add in. Sustrans have been going now for about 30 years. We're an engineering charity, and we started off with the 1995, 20 years ago. This is the 20th anniversary now of the National Cycle Network, which back in 2006 we opened up a section through East Trot Park. We now have the NCN 23, which runs from Reading all the way down to Sandown. I wouldn't cycle at all, but a lot of people do, and it's good for getting networks into the town. We have bike offices with schools, encouraging pupils and staff to cycle to school. In the city, in the town, we have My Journey, working through the chamber, working with small businesses, helping staff get to work instead of the boss saying you just get to work on time. Through the local Sustainable Transport Fund, we've had officers going in and helping staff in that respect. Oops, wrong button, Lee. So the proposal. The idea was, as has been said before, cycling is a sustainable form of transport, and 4 out of 5 journeys are under 3 to 5 miles, which for most people seems a long way, but if you put it into minutes, it's probably a 20-25 minute journey. It does reduce congestion. This is not about closing motorways, closing motorway junctions. It's about making the easier journeys for community to get around better. It does improve air quality. There's been studies done around the country and elsewhere that proves if you reduce the use of the motor car by giving alternatives, then it does help. And naturally there are health and well-being benefits. I mentioned the My Journey teams and Bike It. They are a third funded in some places through the health organisations. And I've just put up a map there which is not that easy to read because it's at the bottom of the screen, but this is taken from census data across the borough, which shows from 2009 up to 2014, and using cycle counts, that people are actually cycling already, so this isn't a new phenomenon. Also taking census data, you can see there's some heat maps there, and that shows the journeys in and around the borough and how people are travelling. So, and when you don't know there's an alternative, you think, well, I'll just get in the car and I'll drive from the southwest of Basingstoke to the northeast of Basingstoke. Oh, the traffic's terrible and it takes me so long. But if there was a better alternative and information was given, then perhaps some of those journeys could be changed. And let us not forget, when the schools are shut, that's only a 10% cut in traffic, but boy, doesn't it make it better to get around. So the need for the cycling strategy. Apologies for the photograph. That's Station Hill, I think, or Knaps Hill. Didn't come out very well, but I've got a cyclist on there. There's actually one there. It adheres to the local transport plans and the local policies. So what's going forward in this strategy is not, oh, I've got an idea, let's come up with something. It actually has some provenance and governance behind it. It follows the local plan, especially local plan CN9 and other policies that are being written into it and are in there. It aligns with the Hampshire County Council draft cycle strategy. Clearly, you are not the highways authority for the borough, and everything you do, you have, if it's on the road, you have to do in partnership with the county, but the county are also going along this journey. It ties in with government policies, as I've already said, and we've also, I'm pleased to say, and I'll come on to that in a moment, we've had some fantastic contributions from the local cycle campaign, some really sensible debates, some ideas, and I think everyone's felt it's been a useful exercise and a grown-up and friendly. Sometimes we've had critical friends. There's not been any shouting or screaming or banging of the tables. It's been brilliant. So we've had a great working relationship of that. I'm really pleased. So we started to look at the draft, and we were commissioned, as it was said, back in March, April time, and we've had a consultation period. We've had officers, where we spent the day with officers, and our community engagement team came in, and we've also had a couple of days at, in Festival Place and in the community centre. So we've tried to engage with everybody, not just the usual suspects. And we had a community mapping exercise, which will come up in a minute. And you've been pioneers in this. We actually set up a URL, a web link, and a mapping system where the general public could go online and make comment. We had over 1,000 comments, and 99.9% of them were sensible. It wasn't the usual trolls or blogs that we get, and I think we're really, really pleased with the outcome of that. And as I said, we had community engagement. We had some events at the Festival Place, and I have to say, I'm amazed at the British public sometimes. You get 3 or 4 really polite people and one not so polite, but you just have to take the hit. So it's been very, very useful. And out of that, the consultation and the online community mapping, we came up with a sort of like a menu of good, bad and indifferent, where there's good links, where there's gaps, where there's good cycle routes, or where there's obstructions. And from that we've been building on what we feel needs to go forward. And also we looked at the Hampshire County Council missing links study that showed the lack of routes. As I say, it's a pioneering exercise, and we've been pleased as an organisation, and I think as a client you've been very, very pleased with it. And to have over 1,000 responses I think is very good. So the draft cycling strategy, which is what we're here to discuss, that's a bit of the background. It is basically a vision to create an environment that is a safe, attractive and practical choice, not alternative choice, for cyclists and others in the borough. And this was born out really from the consultation processes, talking to officers and talking to the Cycle Campaign Group. And it's also really based also on the sort of work we've done elsewhere in Bicester, Oxford, London and in Southampton. So it's to create new routes and linkages. It's to create safer cycling. It's to allow and provide for cycle parking. There is some cycle parking. Myself and my colleagues have been around Basingstoke. I know Basingstoke not quite like the back of my hand, but it's a really nice borough, and I'm pleasantly surprised, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. And it's a lovely place to move around in, and a lovely park north of the station where there's a lot of history there. I didn't realise that. We need to talk about promotion and encouragement, as mentioned in My Journey teams earlier on, and maintenance and signage. A lot of things that came up in the consultation was some of it's good, some of it's bad, but we need to sort out cutting back bushes, cutting back branches, and where does it actually go to? Where are the joined up routes? And we as an organisation, we actually have a group of volunteer rangers that look after parts of National Cycle Network around the country, and we've got a really good bunch here. And so out of all of the things that we've been doing so far and writing the strategy, you'll see that there has been a map produced, which members you have in front of you, and this is a starter for 10. I'd like to sort of say to everyone today that the infrastructure is there, the boundaries are there, most of the roads are there, but from the community mapping, from the consultation, and going out on site and using our experience elsewhere, we've come up with this sort of map. And you can see the heat maps. You've got the purple where the new developments are proposed. You've got employments, you've got schools, colleges, etc. So, and you'll notice there's a blue line comes from the bottom and goes in all the way up through to the top. And that's actually NCN 23, which I mentioned earlier on. And on the map, you'll see that there's dotted blue. That's actually what's in place. And the light blue is where we've identified the gaps. And there is severance. The ring road and the railways create severance. There's severance because people don't know that you can actually get 3 or 4 miles from one side to the other, and it's not that bad, but it could be better. So we have a draft map in production, which is going out to, well, we'll be part of the strategy, but it's also going out to consultation. So, next steps. That's hopefully not too much of a canter through where we are, and if you want me to go back on over anything, please do ask, and I'll now hand back over to Mark. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Just to finish up, really, leading on from committee, and we'll obviously be seeking the views of the committee through the recommendation, but we'll be undertaking consultation on a draft cycle strategy and the map you've got in front of you, and that will be available for comment from late October into December. As part of that, there'll be a short online survey when we'll be looking to gauge views on where the priorities should be, if we've missed out any key potential routes on the map, and really what people think of the strategy to date. The intention is to include an article in Basingstoke and Dean Today, which will go out in late November, so that goes to all households in the borough, and from there there'll be a short online survey that people can connect to. The intention being that we'll bring an updated cycle strategy to Cabinet in early 2016 for adoption. Just a reminder of the recommendation in the report. It's to note the contents of the report and to express any views to the portfolio holder, such that any changes can be made. In particular, we're interested in the views on the proposed targets in the strategy, and that's the targets are really to double what this current level of cycling is in the borough. Borough-wide it's 1.5% at the moment, and in the town it's 3.5%, so we're looking to double that over the course of the strategy period.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you. Appreciate that. I'd like to invite Mrs. Rainbow, if she'd like to take a seat at the end there. And I know you've been here before, so you know how the machine works. And I'll invite you to present some comments to the committee.
Good evening, Chairman, officers and councillors and members of the public. I actually am here to represent Cycle Basingstoke, which is a cycle campaign which is 1 year old this week. Cycle Basingstoke welcomes the cycle strategy, as many people want to cycle, yet there is not the infrastructure to do so. We agree with the themes of the strategy, particularly cycle routes along all the main traffic corridors into the town centre. Unfortunately, existing routes are poor quality and they do not go far enough and do not serve the new developments, whether it is the new critical care unit, the new hospital, Basingstoke Golf Course, Razors Farm, Bramley, Sherfield. We therefore we as Cycle Basingstoke want to have direct, fast, convenient routes into the town centre from the town periphery and eventually from neighbouring communities. We want to know, how is the cycle strategy going to link into the local plan? How can all the present and, more importantly, future developments have a blue cycle highway into the town centre and the station? The golf course site, for example, only links to the neighbouring two residential areas. It has no direct route into the town. We want to know, how can any measures in the cycle strategy be enforced? How are you going to ensure that new developments conform to manual for streets and best practice, such as London cycle design standards? How will the cycle strategy principles be interpreted in transport assessments and enforced in travel plans? At present, site layouts disadvantage cycling and there is poor cycle permeability. How will the cycle strategy ensure that developers contribute to off-site facilities, such as arterial cycle routes? I could go on, but I won't. I will merely distribute to councillors these leaflets which have got pictures of good cycle design so that we know what we are aiming for. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Rainbow. If you'd like to just put those leaflets probably on the table on the side. Not normally, we don't do that at committee. Because what we're doing is addressing the report tonight. Thank you very much for your contribution. We'll pick them up. Don't worry. And please, if I could ask you to remain seated in case the members of the committee have got some questions for you. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Heather. Can I just ask, were you yourself personally or your cycle group engaged by council officers or Sustrans in the consultation or the development of this strategy? Sorry.
Yes, we were engaged actively at the commissioning stage, in fact.
And the points that you've just highlighted there now this evening, were those part of your sort of initial requests and discussions?
Sorry, I, as a representative for the CTC, have been campaigning for an SPD for quite a few years, about 4 or 5. I gave a presentation to the Liberal Democrats and also to the Labour Party for that. Cycle strategy links into that, but the two are not identical.
Any more questions? Councillor Harvey first, followed by Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. Heather, one of the things I think that I'm trying to get my head around with this, and I'd appreciate your take on it, is the relationship between the cyclists in town and everybody else. And what I'd be interested in your view of the current network, because a lot of the current network is going to stay regardless of what happens with the strategy. The strategy is seeking to add to perhaps or change the dynamic of overlaps with pedestrians and the way that cycle paths at the moment in a number of areas are actually mixing with pedestrians. I'd appreciate your view on that. But also the number of key junction points that seem to be identified as being barriers, and the way that we're going to have, or how we can overcome it with just a strategy, because you're saying you're campaigning for an SPD, which is a very different beast to a strategy, and I'm just trying to understand the difference between the two on that, on those two fairly important matters, actually.
The problem with cycling in any town, and particularly in Basingstoke, is conflict between bicycles and vehicles, and the conflict between bicycles and pedestrians. Unfortunately, bicycles are not equipped with wings. So when you are on the road, on the carriageway, you are regarded as a nuisance and in the way. You should be on the footway, where it's illegal. When you are on the footway or on a path, you then have conflict with pedestrians. Neither pedestrians nor cyclists like sharing the space, particularly if there is a dog and a lead involved, because it is quite, there are major accidents that way. So the local plan, which is the Hampshire County Council, has the principle of make, do, amend. It goes back to the Second World War. And there is a danger that because one is anxious that you will not meet your targets, that you will make, do, amend too much. So the quality of the cycle routes isn't good enough to be usable. So the constant complaint that we have from members of the public, and we are not aiming at cycle clubs, we are aiming at everybody, from the person who cannot even ride a bicycle and is 50 years old, please help, to the person who would like to take up cycling as a sport, because it is, along with football, the top sport in the country. So it is a real problem when we try to mix cyclists and pedestrians together. So this is why this has been produced nationwide by various cycle campaigns throughout the country, and there are more detailed versions of it as well, laying out design of what we want. Sustrans also has got a design manual. Persuading our Highways Authority to adopt it, of course, is another matter, and it is very, very expensive. So that is the problem with the conflict with pedestrians. What was the other question?
You covered it well, just
Oh, the junction. Now, the other part, which is a real problem, is junctions and roundabouts. Junctions and roundabouts cause the major severance. So, for example, Brighton Hill roundabout, Victory roundabout, Eastrock roundabout, you cannot get across them. And in traffic management schemes, it is always about increasing capacity, but it is purely capacity for cars, not increasing capacity for cycling. So this is another important point, and it is neglected in the local plan.
Thank you. Do you have any comments? Or do you want to leave it till after the questions? After the questions. Councillor Mr. James.
I've got a couple of questions. The first one is, in relation to the targets, do you think they're ambitious enough, or would you like them to be bigger, smaller? What do you think?
I think it's very good that we've got a target of doubling cycling, and I think it is quite feasible because it is a very, very low start point. The lower the start point, the easier it is to double it. We know that Basingstoke has some of the lowest levels of cycling in the county. So again, we have got the possibility of increasing them. We know from the survey done by Sustrans that there is a lot there that people don't know about. It just needs linking up. So it doesn't require a lot of work to create better infrastructure, particularly if we have good information about it being there. What I think we could do is to look at not just increasing the target for bike cycling to work, but also look at targets which would simultaneously monitor what we're doing. So you are looking at local plans, looking at local transport plans, so that people who create a transport plan, they need to have a baseline of the percentage of people cycling to their place of work or leisure or whatever it is. So that is information that we could extract. The schools, we have bikeability cycle training. At the moment, figures are not produced as to how many children are trained. So again, the greater the number of people trained, the better information we would have as to how successful we were with the strategy. The strategy is only looking at children in the last term of primary school doing cycle training. They then go out with their parents who say, no, that's the wrong way to cycle, you should do it like this. And they are not up to date with the modern cycle techniques in keeping safe on the road. So we need to extend cycle training to parents. So in some way or other, we need to extend it. And then in secondary school, it is not followed up by the third level of the cycle training, so the children are only able to cycle on quiet roads, not on busy roads. So, and we also have a big demand from adults, and they don't know about the cycle training. And when, for adults, we're talking about confidence training. We won't use the same word, obviously, but I have had at least 3 inquiries from adults in their 50s and 60s saying, please can I learn how to ride a bike? And one person is a member of our group. She learnt a year ago, and she said, the trouble is I would like to ride the bike, but everywhere I go there is a severance problem. She doesn't use the word severance, obviously. There is a barrier. I can't get across the road. I can't get across the junction. There's a one-way street system in the way.
On that point, certainly.
I hope this assists, Chairman, but two things. Firstly, for those who might not be familiar with what Heather is saying about training, most of us grew up with the understanding that you keep into the left, but the modern cycling teaching is that you make yourself visible by being out in front of a lorry, not down the left-hand side of it. For instance, that's one example. I think that's perhaps important. And the other point you just raised about yes, I mean, I think we've all got that on board. I mean, it's mighty difficult, but the other part of the strategy is that if we increase the numbers of people cycling, then the numbers of people going round the difficult obstacles and junctions makes it a lot easier for people to go around, because people will be learning to expect cyclists on the road with them going around the junction. The problem at the moment is that the numbers are so small, and therefore the fear factor is that much greater. And so it's not about obviously removing every single junction and turn them into traffic lights and everything else, or whatever the options would be, but it's a question of if the volume of cyclists increase, then some of these problems also diminish as well, I think.
Could I just add that I'm just thinking of the major junctions, the roundabouts along the A30, for example.
Councillor Mr. James. You had another point, I believe.
Yes, thank you. In relation to the point you raised about the SPD, and obviously as a Labour group we support that and would like to promote that. Why is that important as opposed to this strategy? What do you think would be the benefit of that?
The benefit of the SPD would be that you could enforce a lot of these measures. It would be a lot easier to collect developer contributions to off-site facilities and be able to say that all sites have to connect to the town centre. At the moment, they only have to connect into existing cycle facilities or cycle routes, and these cycle routes aren't necessarily usable or useful. So the SPD can be enforced. It will have, hopefully, parking standards, again, which would be enforced. A good example of that is the Transport SPD for Oxford.
Councillor Cubitt.
Can I just ask, thank you very much for coming to talk, but have you actually seen the proposed strategic cycle map produced by Sustrans with the interconnections that are being proposed by them?
Yes, we have.
Mark Lambert.
Thank you, Chair. If I can just come back on a few points. I don't want to labour every single point, but the strategy does include many of the points Heather makes. In terms of the supplementary planning document, the SPD, to prepare an SPD, you need to have a hook in the local plan policy in order to hang the SPD from. We don't have such a hook. Having said that, the strategy can be something that we use through the development control process and CO9. So I don't think the status of it is too much of a concern. When an application is determined, obviously that's looked at by the Borough Council and Hampshire County Council as the highway authority. Since we'll have a strategy in place, we will be able to say to applicants, well, you know, we've got this aspiration for a link here to join up our network. We want you to be contributing towards making that happen. So I think the strategy will do what Heather wants it to do in that sense, albeit it won't be badged as an SPD.
Nick, can I ask you to contribute? Go right ahead.
Thank you, Chair. On the SPD basis, the East Hants cycle strategy was a similar document to this. Was written about 10 years ago, and there was a similar note put in that any new developments should provide for connecting cycle routes, Section 106 contributions, etc. And Heather wouldn't have seen the document that we prepared, but I did mention the policies that this is built on. I would feel comfortable and confident that, because we're on your side, that it will, if you do vote for this, it will be a hook to hang, sorry, wrong word. I do apologise, to discuss with developers. I'm really sorry, I didn't mean it the way it sounded. Thank you.
And I think normally if you want to go down to the level of detail that SPDs tend to go down to, you've got to have a strategy sitting over the top of it, you know, the wider vision, because when you come down to individual new developments that have come along, they're only a portion of your strategy. So you've got to have an overall picture of what you want, and then you start to implement it through the individual applications, as was said, through the development control process. At least we've got a vehicle to do it, and we're not relying on Hampshire County Council. This is for Basingstoke and Dean. But yes, thank you very much. Is this questions to Heather? No, okay, we'll come to that in a minute, Councillor. Thank you. Heather, thank you very much for coming this evening. Very informative. If you'd like to leave those brochures around, the members will be able to pick them up, because I certainly want to see one myself. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a question to officers, and now we're...
Questions to officers with the presentation of the report at the moment.
Thank you very much. And it was certainly a very interesting strategy document, and I'm fully supportive of a cycling action plan. You know, my wife is a triathlete and gets out on the road quite a lot, and I am known every so often to be kicking and screaming, dragged onto a bike, okay, to get out there. Having said that, I've noticed from the proposed strategic cycle network map that you have, okay, that when we go out towards my ward, which is Oakley and North Waltham, we basically stop almost at Manydown. Okay, my ward obviously has a very high number of cyclists. They have a road cycling club that every week has 3 different routes, or 3 different activities, one for beginners, one for intermediates, and one for advanced, where they go out on the roads. And I'm just a bit concerned that I don't see the point of having, you know, a cycle route starting at, say, Manydown, okay, and all my residents coming onto the cycle route at Manydown, if they've got to go for a couple of miles and be shunted off their bikes by cars, okay, on thin lanes. So I'd like to know what is the proposal to actually extend the cycle network out to residents, certainly of my ward. Thank you.
Effectively, what we've got there is, in all directions, the strategic network stops at the edge of the urban area. And we see that as the point at which you reach the countryside and there are more open lanes and the like within which recreational routes take place. The exception may be the B3 for 100, but there are other routes towards Oakley across the Pack Lane cycleway route, for example. So it's not an exclusive route. This is just the network that we see as strategic, that links the key areas of the town towards the town centre. Obviously, there will be other settlements outside the periphery of Basingstoke that will need to be linked as well, but this is kind of focused on Basingstoke at this stage.
I understand that, but you know, it's a cycle strategy and an action plan for Basingstoke and Dean. Okay, emphasis on the borough. Okay, not just the urban area. So I think what you need to do is you need to actually go back and revisit it.
All right.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Smith.
There's obviously been discussion with different groups. I want to pick up on something Councillor Frost said. Has there been a lot of conversation with some of the road cycling clubs in the borough and around the borough? Because obviously you want people on their bikes, using their bikes to get into work, into town, that's great, but there are also people who are recreational cyclists, and I want to know whether those road cyclists are being consulted.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I'd like to think, as I say, we've had 1,000 responses just on the mapping, plus people came along to the event in June in the community centre and to the festival place, and we've got a rough idea of who those people were, and I'd like to think that we have catered for everybody. When I say we've catered for everybody, we've taken on board everybody's comments. It is I haven't actually got the data to say who those people are, but I would be comfortable to say that yes, we have spoken to everyone. As was mentioned with Councillor Frost, it is very I mean, I've been working with Sustrans since 1999, and a lot of people want connections into the rural areas, and rightly so. In a lot of cases, one hasn't the gift of the land, and it's down to, at the end of the day, it's engineering, it's money, and it's land. In a lot of cases, it's the land is an issue, and I don't want to get into a big debate on this one, but I feel that we have tried to take account of everybody's needs, and it's not going to be, maybe not everyone will be happy at the time, but if we don't start with a strategy somewhere, as the Chair said, we won't be able to draw down money from the LEP or from 106 contributions or SIL you're going to discuss later. It's got to start somewhere.
Can I just interrupt just for a second to answer, I think, what Councillor Smith is trying to get at? Could I ask officers in association with Sustrans, could we have a sort of list of who was consulted? So it's sort of a bit of open information for the committee, and just circulate that by email or through committee services, possibly. That should answer your question, Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that there will be people who are road cyclists or club cyclists who have taken part. I mean, I think I took part myself and fall into that category, but I think it might be helpful if some of the existing road cycling clubs in the borough were specifically contacted, I think is what I'm getting at. I think that would be an appropriate thing to do.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I've got 2 points. The first one is really in support of Councillor Frost, his point. According to this map, the cycleway stops approximately a mile short of Sherfield on Loddon, leaving people on the A33, which is probably one of the busiest roads in the area, and there is no alternative. There's no way around it. So you will be on the A33 cycling, which I've done, and it is very unpleasant. The other point is on the recreational cycling, looking out on cycleway number 3. Is that intended to link in with the towpath of the Basingstoke and the Basingstoke Canal? Because I would think that is a very, very popular venue for recreational cycling. Thank you.
We certainly see the opportunities available in terms of the Vine, the connections through the canal to encourage further cycling. So I think we would be looking to, later down the line, perhaps through some of the actions, is to provide better information on how you can access the Vine, the canal and so on for recreational cycling. So I think that will be one of the actions perhaps in the action plan if it's not there already.
Councillor Richards.
Thank you. I'm going to beat on the same drum a bit as Councillor Frost, because I'm also out in the sticks. I represent a ward in Tadley, and I make a special plea for Tadley because, of course, we have AWE there, employing many thousands of people. While I was canvassing pre-election in sort of April time, I had several people actually did mention to me, when I said, well, what is it you want for Tadley? It did actually come up as a requirement, or a request, I should say, a good cycle track between Tadley and Basingstoke. I think one because it's we've got a major employer in AWE, and people said if you take the other roads, I mean it is dangerous. It is. They are quite concerned about it. The A340, yes.
Thank you. That is noted. They've taken that on board, the officers.
Can I ask one other question? Was Tadley Town Council involved in this at all? Have they given any comment?
From recollection, we sent consultation notifications to all parish councils and town councils. I don't recall seeing any specifics from Tadley. Having said that, when we do consult more widely, we'll make sure that everything, a consultation letter goes to all the town and parish councils.
Nick.
Thank you, Councillor Chair. Thank you, Councillor Richards. I think the strength of the conversation this evening shows that there is a desire for more people to cycle from the outlying areas and in the more urban areas. And having a strategy will allow the borough to take that forward and show that there is a demand. And I think the document will be a very good mechanism of doing that. And I'm grateful for the questions and the support you've shown this evening. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. My question kind of breaks into three parts, and I appreciate Mark's and our colleagues' help on this in terms of just understanding the planning element to this. I don't disagree with a lot of what's in here. I think, I'll just say up front, the work done here, respect that and understand that, and it's taken us so far. And I guess my questions really want to push us on a little bit further if we can. In terms of how this will play out in planning, can you tell me how you would envisage a material consideration being played out through either a developer or through somebody taking this strategy and putting it into action? What if they basically said, no, I'm not interested? What powers, what evidence of effect would we have on somebody that chose not to take part in what you have as a strategy?
I think we can attach some material weight to the strategy. It's been through the consultation, we've engaged with people, so it's got that strength behind it, as it were. The county have indicated that this sits nicely within their more overarching framework, so we would anticipate that in partnership with Hampshire in determining applications, we and they would use it in providing comments and making sure that applications are in conformity with it.
Okay, so we're talking about some material weight and a commentary on a planning application. That's different to saying a developer would have an obligation through what might be an SPD to realise elements of this strategy. As a developer, I could approach you and say, cost-benefit analysis, Highways Authority says this is far more important, therefore, in your analysis and your planning colleagues' analysis on the other side of this, not from a forward planning point of view, but from a DC point of view, it places an awful lot of pressure on DC officers to be given interpretations in their reports to committee, and then places DC members in the invidious position of, well, how much weight do we really attach to this, and will it stand up to an appeal if we reject an application on the basis of it not conforming to our cycle strategy? I can't imagine most planning inspectors are going to say, I'm sorry, but I'm kicking out 400 houses because your cycle plan the box hasn't been ticked.
Yes, can I just pick up on that? I think my understanding of how this would work is that at the moment a planning application comes in, and often the developer will be looking at the immediate access arrangements for cycling and pedestrians as well as other modes. But at the moment we don't have a very clear cycle network, so we don't have ways of showing how that's going to link into a strategy. What this enables us to do is to show how it links into a wider strategy, and then if some of those elements are more remote from the actual development, they could be picked up as part of that wider strategic needs that will be funded through SIL. So it's a combination, I think, of what the developer's doing, and the developer then has a framework in which to plan for cycling.
So we're still looking, in essence, for the goodwill of developers, and we're also looking at SIL. We'll come on to that debate again to a certain extent. I mean, what I'm conscious of is the difference between having design guidance that would take a developer in a particular direction, that would help Hampshire Highways advise developers on their off-site contributions and their off-site works, that would then assist, for example, in network support and network creation, A to B to C and so on, that would be linked up through what you would consider as the wider strategic view when assessing an application coming in. And I mean, I know we debated this, and this is, to be fair, this is before Mark's time as the cabinet member, because this was debated a long while ago in terms of the cycle elements of our local plan, and other members around the table had a very different view and shot that down in flames because they took a different view to cycling than other members. I remember sitting in those meetings and having that vivid conversation. My problem with Hampshire Highways, and can I pick this other element of the question up, is at the end of the day they're the Highways Authority. At the end of the day they are the arbiters of most of this. Where in a sense then does the money come from if we have all the issues with SIL? The second point with Hampshire Highways is they're spending millions on our roundabouts right now. And if I look at those roundabout schemes that they're proposing, very little of that correlates to what you're proposing in the cycle strategy. So there's a sense it's almost a case of they're shutting the door before the horse has bolted, so to speak. We're getting the cycle strategy after they've already drawn up plans for some of the most significant junctions that you've identified are choke points.
Picking up the funding point first, there are a number of opportunities to obtain funding for cycle schemes. Most notably is the LSTF, the Local Strategic Transport Fund, which is administered by the Enterprise M3 LEP. And the Hampshire County Council have been quite successful to date in obtaining funds from that to fill in some of the missing links that we currently have in the network. There's also opportunities through our new homes bonus and 106 and SIL as has been outlined. And 106 is particularly helpful where we look where there's an issue that needs to be remedied as a result of development where it meets the 106 tests. So what was the other question?
The other point was all that money that's being spent, for example, on the roundabouts that you've identified on your cycle map. Very little of that money is addressing the issues you've identified.
Of course, I can make the simplistic comment, wherever you start that's going to be the case. But we've got to start somewhere, and there will always be schemes coming forward which will have predated this. I can tell you, though, that the schemes that are before the Cabinet next week have been run against this strategy and are compatible with it, because that was the first thing I realised was going to happen as soon as we discussed it within a week.
Well, just to finish, Chair, I thought the irony of it was, you know, you've got this consultation running at the same time County was running its consultation and all those roundabouts, and it seemed ironic that neither of the conversations were being had, to be honest with you. And I guess my final point, just if I may, Chair, question. I struggle and have struggled with, for example, the major application in our ward, the Eli Lilly site, where County's cycle solution has been to continue to combine pedestrians and cyclists on the same routes. And their solution to the problem that we've identified, particularly under the underpasses under the railway bridge, was in effect to give priority to the cyclists over the pedestrians. When we challenged that, they put bollards in the way of the cyclists. There's an awful lot to be done here, I think, and I would love to see and understand County's point of view. I've no issue with our officers and totally respect the work you've done, and the same with the Cabinet member. But I would just make the point to our colleagues that Hampshire have got a big hand in this, and I don't, at the moment, see any move from Hampshire Highways in their approach. And that's a really current live application that we're dealing with.
I can only answer from the generalities. I dare say that if we are active and proactive rather than being passive, we'll have so much more information and evidence to put forward to argue, rather than just leaving it all to Hampshire to do their best from a greater distance. And that's what we're seeking to achieve.
I have one question, and Councillor James will move to you in a minute. Policy CN6? CN9? How relevant is that as far as the local plan is concerned? Is it a valid policy that we have put forward to bolster up any of the strategy stroke the implementation of any of this, bearing in mind the previous questions that have been asked?
It's certainly relevant once the plan's adopted and the policy is in place and is active in terms of development control, then it can be applied as applications come forward. And so this will certainly be a material consideration in determining applications. And the detail included within the policy in CN9 and also in the SS3 policies which allocate the sites will help us to ensure that cycling is considered as part of multimodal connections to sites and ensuring those links are made.
Okay, thank you. And I think the other discussion was, you know, how much weight would be applied to that particular policy, but I think that comes in the round when we look at particular applications in the development control process. Okay, Councillor James.
In relation to the status, again, of a document, of this strategy, at what point would you consider looking at an SPD, or are you ruling that out? Is it something that we could, you know, because you were saying we need a hook. I don't quite understand what that you mean by that. Yeah, I don't, you know, what hook do we need? Because we did SPDs, we didn't have such hooks. Oh, did we? You know, if you could explain that.
Quite simply, the hook has to be in a policy in the plan, and at present we don't have a clear hook that says we will have a cycling strategy as an SPD. So at this late stage in the plan preparation process, it's very difficult to bring that forward.
So in the life of our local plan, can we, at a later stage, introduce an SPD on cycling?
if we felt that it was particularly important to the borough, we could introduce a further policy or review a policy. It's a very long process, though, to bring in a new policy into the plan, because of given the consultation that needs to be undertaken, and ultimately an examination that needs to test that that policy is sound and meeting the tests.
And the actions within this strategy, will it enable us against any new development or major development to monitor what we've achieved in cycling, whether it's on-site provision or off-site, effectively, and see that, you know, where we're going as a council, or do we need to, you know, bolster those actions up to enable us to monitor and review, you know, whether we do need to, even in the next local plan, have an SPD?
I think certainly the actions can be monitored going forward. Most of them are clear, and it's going to be pretty obvious when we've done something physical in terms of providing new signage, providing new cycle parking, or better still, providing a new link. So those kind of things will be clear for all to see.
Is there any provision for the hire of cycling in the town within this strategy?
There isn't at the moment, and often sort of cycle hire schemes, you know, come through sort of private development, seeing that there's a market there, and I guess the first stage is to ensure that there are enough cyclists there for there to be a market in terms of cycle hire. I think at this stage we are at the beginning of a journey in terms of the cycling, and we're probably not looking at cycle hire until we've got a more coherent network in place that's better signed. But it is a great aspiration, yes.
Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm starting off with questions to Nick, but if the officer wants to jump in, great. Good evening, Nick. Nice to see you again. I think I remember meeting you down at East Rock Park when we were commissioning the totem pole for the route through the Reading. I wanted just to get a better understanding of how the data, which is telling us that we have 3.5% town and 1.5% borough cycling journeys. So my first question is, how was this data compiled?
Thank you, Councillor. The data was taken from census material, which is already on the borough website, I believe. So we just extracted it and put it into tabular form to be part of the document.
So I guess my question then is to the officer, how old is the census information?
So the census takes place every 10 years, so 2011 was the last one, and that's why we're suggesting in our monitoring that we need more than just relying on that, because that's just, I mean, that's very accurate in terms of travel to work data, but it is only once every 10 years, and we need to supplement that with actual cycle counters, which already exist. The county council have a number of those across the network to get the information midway between the two census results.
So with what we evidence, certainly in the urban area of the town, that figure is probably considerably low than the real situation with increased cycling that we now witness. So we're possibly starting off with a lower figure than we really should be, and therefore I would suggest maybe our target figure should be uplifted. But that's a comment. My question's been answered, thank you, Chair. I want to also just to ask, when we're talking in terms of access to funding, have we looked at any potential European funding for such a grand strategy and vision?
Not as yet, but I'm sure once we've got the strategy in place, we'll be keen to explore any opportunities that come forward for funding elsewhere.
Well, it'd be good to see it in the document. It might then sort of be a prompt, because it doesn't appear in the document as one of the sources of funding, and I would suggest maybe we want to keep our sort of sights firmly fixed on the potential of European funding. Again, Chair, this is an urban, potentially more of an urban issue than it is rural. With the growing number of mobility scooter users, and we see in the strategy that we are talking of perhaps method of increasing the network would incorporate shared pedestrian and cycle routes. Where do you see mobility scooter users fitting in this particular model? And I'm looking at in the area of signage and enforcement.
Thank you. Well, Sustrans always works in access for all, where it's practical, without getting into the finer detail of where the routes will be going and the widths, etc. We would always err on the designing for all, and so hopefully that will give you some comfort. But it's down to the final designs of all the routes. Without running off with another hair, so to speak, evidence that we've shown throughout the United Kingdom is that shared use routes work better than segregating if you're using a traffic-free route, but that again depends on the amount of space available and where the routes are running to and from. So it's an overarching thought, but we will take into account, well, the document does take into account, and all our designs take into account access for all.
Is there a specific mention of the increasing number of mobility scooter users in the report?
Honest answer, no.
Could I possibly suggest we need to have some entry in relation to that, at least to acknowledge that that is a growing situation that we've got to make provision for? I'd also like to ask, under hazards, the situation for on the highways, what do you see in relation to addressing the sunken surface drains and the sunken utility covers? And I ask this question because I've heard it several times this evening, reference to getting engaged with Hampshire County Council and Hampshire County Council coming on board. Well, they certainly aren't on board right now in respect of this particular aspect. I'm continually reporting the dangerous aspect for cyclists of sunken surface drains, and I'm continually not getting any response. This is not even just an urban, this stretches right out to wherever any cyclists are being asked to cycle and share the highway. There's no attention to this very fundamental, dangerous cycling hazard.
Thank you. It's a very valid point, one of which I do encounter when I'm on my bicycle. You'll recall in my presentation I did mention maintenance and signage, and I think it's a good point that you've raised, and we need to find a way through that. So I'm not making decisions on behalf of other people, but
I find that whenever I report big holes in the roads around me, which are dangerous both to cyclists and to the cars and our tyres, the speed with which Hampshire County Council actually repairs them is extraordinary, even on the small lanes. So I think it's quite important that we as councillors do actually photograph the hole, send it to the county councillor and give them a couple of weeks, because it's extraordinary, certainly in my ward, the speed with which it's repaired. But they can't repair something they don't know about.
Well, I certainly wasn't suggesting. I think I did say I'm continually reporting them and I'm getting no action, so maybe I'll get the next one I want reported. I'll get you to do it, Councillor Cubitt. Maybe I'll get a better response.
I say, as soon as you photograph it, they're worried about liability. So that's the thing. Get it photographed and emailed to them, and then send it back to the resident who told you, and all sorts of things start happening. Wheels start turning. Let's put it.
Yeah. Okay.
I can't comment on the efficiency of your county councillors.
Which ones?
Well, the ones that aren't apparently very good.
Just one last one at this minute. Chair, I wanted to ask, in the report there's mention of cycle trailers as special users. if someone could give me a description of what they're actually referring to as a cycle trailer.
Nick will correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a trailer behind a bike for children.
Thank you. I'll address that under comments.
Councillor Loney.
Thank you very much. In light of the cross-party parliamentary report last year, which called for an increase in cycling levels to at least 10% of all journeys by 2025 and 25% by 2050, and the benefits of the green agenda, why is there no mention of any possible potential funding from central government? Thank you.
That comes via the way the government now distributes money for transport scheme generally comes via the LEPs. So in our case, the Enterprise M3 LEP, and they have a local sustainable transport fund, the LSTF, which we or county bid for to secure improvements. So that's really why the government isn't specifically referred to.
Our chair was very clear that this is Basingstoke and Dean's strategy, and you've just said that county applies for. Can we not apply on behalf of Basingstoke and Dean? Because I sometimes feel that if it goes to county, we get lost in the... Thank you.
Just to confirm, yes, we can bid, and we have bid for funds in the past, sometimes in partnership with the county, sometimes by ourselves, so that's certainly got potential.
Very quickly, because you've had two opportunities now.
It's just coming back
Councillor James.
on that point, Mark, is in relation to that target that has been set by government, are we likely to be able to achieve that in Basingstoke, considering we're at a very low ebb at the moment, and is it realistic that we're going to be able to achieve that target?
If we don't have a strategy, you can't even start to address the target, and one should aspire to be pragmatic and be practical. And I think the figures that we've put forward are deliverable, and let's just go forward and embrace it. We can always look at a target and measure against things, but if we don't have something a document to put a target in, then we've got nowhere to start. So if you look at Cambridge, if you look at Oxford, you look at other places, or Gosport, which is a part of Hampshire, cycling is higher. But that's because historically it always has been. An urban town like Basingstoke, which has grown as it has since the 1960s, you're starting from a low base. But as has been shown tonight, there is a desire and there's a demand for cycling. There's an aspiration for it. And if we don't start now, then I think we're going to miss a golden opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, members. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, the questions have actually generated many comments that have been fed into the officers, and I know they've made a note of just about every single one of them. Now, the recommendation is any views expressed by the committee, especially about the targets, which we just discussed here, are reported to the portfolio holder so that any necessary amendments can be made to the paper. Is there anybody who has a specific comment that hasn't already been mentioned that we can record this evening to pass the portfolio holder? Councillor Ms. Bean.
Thank you. I fear that this is probably fairly small and some may be insignificant, but the first thing I saw when I looked at this draft cycling strategy was the lovely picture of two cyclists without a helmet on. Could I perhaps request that we look at that picture and promote safe cycling rather than unsafe cycling, please?
Point made. Very well made and taken. No other comments? Councillor Barker?
This is comments to the paper, General. Thank you, Chair. Well, yes, I want to just first of all say thank you for the efforts and the work gone into preparing the report. I have, I think, made the point, whilst somebody might, the view may well be that we're starting from a low base. I think actually that base is considerably higher than what is indicated. We're working off of figures, data which are, I believe, something like 4 years out of date. Cycling in the urban town is certainly increased incredibly. If you just go to look at the requirement that's being asked of cycle storage at the British Rail network station and so forth, that's a clear indication of an incredible increase in cycling within the town centre in a ring road. I do hope that when we start looking at implementing some of these proposals, that they're delivered considerably more successfully than the previous attempt to introduce a cycling network in the town. We have so many routes that start from nowhere and then stop them in the middle of somewhere else. The only reason you might think is that it was to just spend money, and some of these are highly dangerous in terms of where the cyclist is expected to then rejoin the motorway carriage. I do personally think there are considerable problems when you're introducing shared cycle routes with pedestrians. One of the biggest complaints that I have about cyclists from residents in my ward is that they come rushing past me, they give no indication of the fact that they're behind me, and why don't any of them have bells? And so we might, in this particular document somewhere, also talk about some needs that cyclists have to adopt in terms of safety for the pedestrian. One thing I do want to say specifically this evening, I would not put my name to anything that is going to promote this incredible situation of a cyclist, an adult cyclist, dragging behind them 2.5 or 3-year-old children in a flimsy trailer with a canvas cover, when you consider the lengths of safety precautions that have to be adopted for motorists in regard to raised seating, seat belts and security. I just find that incredible. So I want to put that down as a marker. I don't support it, and I actually totally oppose it. I think I would just make one other plea, Chair. When it talks in terms of creating a online mechanism for the public to report faults, can we also just have some other means of people reporting? Can we not continually we can major the online, but can we have also another option for people to report problems and so forth? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Parky. Your particular objection to that child carriage at the back is noted and recorded. Councillor Harvey, comments to the paper, please.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Vice Chair. Just wanted to pick up the points of the recommendations, really, that's in front of us and make a comment. I personally, I think, in terms of what we've heard tonight and also the work that's been done, which is good, it gets us started, all that argument is absolutely fair. I totally appreciate that, and no criticism at all. But looking forward, I think cyclists are very right, really, to be disappointed we dropped the ball with the local plan. I regret those conversations, and I regret being on the losing side of that debate, because I think we should have had a hook in there in the original proposals and the original policies that were being discussed. That being the case, we haven't, so we've got to go somewhere. The strategy is here. I think it would be useful for the committee to give a view to the Cabinet member that said, in the future, as early as it is feasible, an adoption of a supplementary planning document which sets out far more than just as in the strategy, but builds on the strategy and takes the strategy on to the next level, really, the next stage on. I mean, a lot of this will be implemented, a lot of this will go through its phases over the next period of time where you try to seek to do things and influence developers in the county. But in the future, I think an SPD is justified, because those points about those other towns and cities is that they planned for cycling. They made provision for in the way they designed and planned. And I think that level of work is something very valuable and we should do if we're serious about this. And the point that Stuart raises, Councillor Parker raises quite rightly about those cycle buggies on the back. If you're in Cambridge or you're in Oxford or you're in Swindon, for the matter, on a few of the roads, you can see how a dedicated cycle lane, that is a relatively safe option, because it's a dedicated cycle lane and all you see in them is cycles. What you don't have is them all mixed in with pedestrians and cars that we do have on our roads and are likely to have for a considerable period of time in the future, unless we really are serious about creating dedicated cycle lane networks, which is something perhaps, again, an SPD should be looking at. And the final point I'd just make, Chair, is that if we went down that road, it would be the designing of that into developments that are then built, like Manydown, like Golf Club, like all of them that are coming forward, all of them, Kennel Farm or Razors Farm, that would be really useful and really powerful to see that level of ability to say to a developer, you should design this in, not treat it as an afterthought, or make a contribution to the county, that the county then picks it up and seeks to plug the hole for the developer. There's a way of doing this. I think I'd like to see an SPD looked at very seriously in the future.
I think the officers and the portfolio holder have brought that on board. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. It's an issue I care about. I think cycling is such a fantastic thing. Can I just note my contrary view to Councillor Parker's, and forgive me, but trailers are designed, they meet safety requirements and they're designed to do that. My personal opinion is that that is probably better than the situation I had as a 2-year-old where I sat on the handlebars, and that I'd take the trailer with the rain cover now any day. I think that's probably better. I think, and it's actually something that picks up in this is a wonderful report and it sets a great foundation. We just need to build the house. And I suppose I look to the portfolio holder and others to do that. And if it were up to me, we'd build a mansion. I think it's a brilliant thing, and it deserves some money being spent on it. It deserves our time and our attention. If I could follow up my point that I just made about the trailers, there's a point in here about supporting cycle training programs for children as undertaken by HCC. Well, obviously it's not ours to influence, but there's a point where you start saying, if you can get people out on their bikes from as young an age as possible, if you can get more people out on the bikes, what you start to do is change the culture. I had the benefit of living on the continent for a few years where the culture was completely different, and you there on your bike, cars gave way for you because they realised that it was another car that wasn't there. You on your bike was another person not in the traffic jam. And I hope that's a culture that this can start to build. And I hope that, well, we have an action plan, and while it's got some good things in it, forgive me, and I don't often quote Alistair Campbell, but none of it's very sexy. There's not a lot on there where you start to go, okay, yeah, I'm getting excited about that. So I just, it's great foundations, and I hope there's more the portfolio holder, with all those involved, can do.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ms. James.
Thank you. I also welcome this strategy. Like Councillor Harvey, I would have liked to seen an SPD in the local plan, and we did push for that, and we gave examples, and so I am disappointed. We took it as far as we could in relation to the local plan, but what I would like to do, like to push again, and I know it was said it was aspirational, is in relation to hubs where people can hire bikes. I think it's really important. There are a lot of people that the purchase of a bike is really expensive, and also if you're getting off of the train and you're wanting to get to a business unit or a business park, not everyone's got a fold-up bike. I just think that, and I urge you, Mark, to look at this and maybe do a pilot in a couple of areas in the town and just start to pilot the possibility of this, and also the maintenance of bikes, because people struggle with the cost of and maintaining bikes. Because what happens is you have a bike for a small age, and before you know it, you've grown out of it, and cycling is quite expensive. So it would be good if we could look at piloting around the borough, maybe linking our parks, and that you could hire bikes in different parks. But I think it's also from the railway station to the business parks that people that are wanting to go to work can jump on a bike and then drop it off and then pick it up on the way back. I just think we need to look at that. That maybe encourage them to come into the town at lunchtime to spend more money in the economy of this town. But I think it's something that we really ought to think about, and it's about innovation. And so, a bit like Councillor Smith was saying, I would like to see a little bit more. I understand this is a basis of a strategy, but I'd like to see more innovation within this. And if I could just give you an example of it's, if I can ask you to look at an SPD that I've been looking at, it's Colchester. I've got a really good example of a SPD. We gave you before Oxford's, but if you look at that one, I think it's really innovative and it might give you some great ideas. But I welcome it. And what I also ask is, what is the life of this strategy? How many years is it? When will it come back? And when can we review it as a committee? And sort of, has it worked? Has it been successful? Do we need to tweak it? If it's a living document. And the other thing I would like to ask is, how does this link to pedestrians? And do we have a pedestrian strategy or a pedestrian SPD? Thank you.
I'm not proposing to have a pedestrian strategy because that could take us in any direction. In terms of this cycling strategy, that once it's been approved, we'll bring it back next year and bring it back every year, and it will grow.
Something that the Vice Chair has just pointed out to me, we're going back to CN9 again in the local plan submission. I would commend paragraphs 5.82 and 5.84, which make specific references to the links of the cycle routes, the mix of pedestrians and cycles, appropriate surfaces. It's all there in principle. So as obligations on developers. So, I think currently we've got the hooks are in CN9. Also, as the portfolio holder just mentioned, at the very latest, in 12 months' time, you're going to have another look at the strategy because there's a lot of work to be done. You've had an input to that tonight, and a lot of this has been taken on board. And I think if it's going to be not reviewed but overhauled, but examined every 12 months, which it should be, we can then look back and say, how's the implementation going? Because that's the way we keep in touch with these things. That's exactly the purpose of committees such as this. So thank you very much for all your inputs. If there's nothing else, I'll call this to a conclusion. And are you happy with that, portfolio holder? Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, Nick, for your time tonight in the presentation. And Mr. Rainbow, thank you very much indeed for your input as well. Right, we move on to the next agenda item. We're switching back to the regular one. This is Community Infrastructure Levy update. Please note the update. And I'll pass that across to the portfolio holder to introduce the paper.
Chairman, thank you. As you have said, this is an update, and it is not the final solution, and it will be coming back before us, I'm sure, in the future. Can I remind members that before some of you engage in a process of hand-wringing, and others of you say, well, there's no point in wringing your hands because we really don't know how it's going to work anyway, remind you all that this isn't an easy process, that infrastructure demands are difficult to predict and are potentially exponential, and that viability of sites in some cases is very fluid, and depends on a number of different issues, all of which are fluctuating at once. Can I remind you all that for all of us dealing with this, we have, because it is new still, a lack of practical experience. Obviously the officers are gaining experience from where other authorities are setting sill levels, and this will then come back for us to consider after the local plan examination process has been completed, shortly, hopefully, and then we can see how it will be put in place and go for examination too. So this is more a question of just making sure that you as a committee are kept up to speed with where we're getting to at the moment before it then moves off into its next phase. And then Mark Lambert will take over.
Thank you, Councillor Raffel. Just really a short introduction to the paper to supplement what Councillor Raffel has outlined. In terms of SIL to date, we undertook consultation on a preliminary draft charging schedule, a first draft, in January 2014. That was followed by consultation on a draft SIL charging schedule, a second draft, in November 2014, and that was the last time that members formally saw and considered the matter of SIL. Appendix 2 to the report sets out a summary of the comments we received during that consultation. The comments we received were mainly around a view that some of the assumptions we used were not correct, and so landowners and developers have sought to provide alternative information to that effect. They've also suggested that some of the costs we included around the infrastructure were, again, not quite right in their view. And there were concerns that the rates that we were proposing would threaten viability. Obviously what we now need to do is make sure that all these comments are fed into the work that we're currently undertaking to make sure the consultants can take those comments on board and consider whether they're correct or not, and whether we need to change the assumptions at all. It's worth highlighting that we also published some updated viability evidence earlier this year, and that was to support the allocation of Hounslow Fields, which arose as a result of the inspectors' exploratory meeting in December last year. So in terms of updates to the viability work, we need to make sure that the viability assessment is as up to date as it can be in moving forward to an examination of SIL. So this means making sure that development costs factored into the work are correct, and we know that some of these costs have changed since the last work was undertaken. I'm sure we're all well aware that market values have changed over the last couple of years or so we need to make sure that those increases in house price values are reflected. We also need to make sure that the approach to providing infrastructure on the larger sites through 106 is fully reflected in the work as well. And probably most importantly is that we need to make sure that issues that come up through the examination, and in particular consideration of the affordable housing issues and the viability linked to that through the examination, are considered when the consultants undertake further work. So there'll be some invaluable discussion at the examination on the affordable housing day that will need to be taken on board, which is partly why we're hanging fire on moving forward with SIL until we've got that under our belts, as Councillor Raffel outlined. Just in terms of moving forward with SIL, we anticipate that we'll be bringing back to members an updated draft charging schedule and the outcome of further work in January. That will then need to go through Cabinet and Council before we undertake consultation during March and April. We anticipate that there will be a SIL examination in July, working towards an inspector's report later in the summer, into the autumn, moving forward towards implementation in April 2017. Just a reminder again of the recommendation, which is to note the comments that we've received to date, and they're set out in Appendix 2, and to note the timetable for further work and the intention to bring the work back to members of this committee in January 2016, subject to the outcomes of the local plan examination and making good progress there.
There's the update for SIL. I'll open it up for questions to the officers. Any questions? Councillor Mr. James.
Thank you. Mark, in the the magazine, the Planning Resources magazine, that they're, in relation to London, the boroughs in London, what they're saying is that the impact of SIL is that there's been a reduction in affordable housing being delivered, and there's real concern about that. Do you have concerns on how this will impact on the delivery of affordable housing?
Through the work that the consultants have done in working out what our SIL viability could be, we've applied some buffers to that to make sure that there's a degree of flex so that we can continue to seek to provide what the policies set out, i.e. 40% affordable housing, without while still obtaining some SIL from the development. So on that basis, we're confident that the SIL levels that we've provided to date and will provide in going forwards should not impact on the affordable housing that's provided.
Can I just push you a bit more? Can you explain that a bit more? Because the reality is the only thing that is flexible, because SIL isn't flexible, the only thing in viability that is flexible is the affordable housing, and it appears that sorry, yeah, but so it appears that the get out of jail is, and it is what is happening is affordable housing is the loser. Can you explain to me what you were saying there about you built in some flex, and could you just give me some bit more detail to that?
The starting point for the work is to feed into the work the policy requirements that we're looking for through the local plan. So 40% affordable housing is one of the key requirements of the plan. So that's fed in at an early stage, and then the outputs from that will tell us the work that Three Dragons have undertaken to date. Tell us what the maximum theoretical SIL values we could achieve. We then would generally apply a buffer to ensure that there is this flex to make sure that the 40% can be achieved and the SIL values that we seek are also achievable, because obviously, as you've outlined, if the affordable housing is too high, then the SIL that can be obtained is impacted on, and vice versa. If you're looking for a high SIL level, the ability to achieve 40% is impacted. So we've struck what we think is the right balance to date, and we'll continue to do so in moving forward. If obviously the policy and the plan sets out that if there's a viability issue, then the applicant is required to provide a detailed viability assessment, which is assessed by the Borough Council and a third party to ensure that it's above board. So we've got that as a fallback position.
But on that point, in relation to viability, under 106 at the moment, we've got over the last 3 years, we've only achieved 20% affordable housing as an average over the last 3 years. And so developers have used viability as an argument to get out of delivering. So, and I was always concerned in relation to this local plan about our policy around viability. And that always worried me that this would happen. And I'm not sure, because we've got the fixed SIL and then we've also got viability and how we've got it. I just want to be confident that we're going to see more affordable housing delivered, because we haven't achieved that over the last 3 years. So I just need you to give me a reassurance that this we won't see, and the examples being given in London is that they are experiencing a significant reduction in the delivery of affordable housing.
Just I suppose to pick up the first point really around the provision of affordable housing today, we don't have the figures in front of us this evening to say how many exactly we provided, but I am sure that it's in the region of more like 35 to 36% over the course of the plan period to date. I don't want to stray into the territory of SIL rate setting this evening, because that's a detailed matter and we need the results of the viability assessment to inform that. So I think that's something that we'll pick up when we come back to this committee in January, when we have the outputs from the work that the consultants have undertaken.
If I could just say, in relation to 2014-15, it was 182, 2013-14 it was 77, 2012-13 it's 45. So if you add that up as an average, it's 20% over the last 3 years, and it falls very short of our policy.
The officers don't have the figures, so yes, they heard you. Okay. Any other questions to the officers about the SIL paper? Councillor Parker, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I'm talking to page 17 of 97, and particularly paragraph 6.3. And I'd like to ask officers, how do we, what's the, we've got here where it says 15% of the levy receipts will be applied to the town and parish councils or the local community where there are no local town or parish council, and in areas with an adopted neighbourhood plan 25% will be. Where's the reasoning for this? How do we justify the difference in those figures?
The percentages that we have to give to the local community are set out in the SIL regulations, so there's no local discretion on that matter. It is 15% for those town or parish councils where there is no neighbourhood plan, and it is at least 25% where they do have a neighbourhood plan.
So I just want to be certain, both those figures are the SIL legislation. But have they given a justification that you understand? And I'd like to myself know.
The government did consult on a meaningful proportion being given to local community, but I don't believe they gave a justification of why they chose those percentages.
Councillor Parker.
Thank you very much. That's the legislation. That's the legislation. I would like to query, say on the same page, paragraph 6.8. Should that not be actually an entry under risk issues?
Potentially it could be. However, I think in 6.11 there is a reference to say, however, there is a risk that if development is not viable, affordable housing, and we talk about viability from there. It could be flagged up in there potentially, but I think that's just the way the report is written.
Well, the purpose of the risk issues paragraphs are to alert us to the potential of shortfall. And we're talking under 6.8, not individual developments, we're talking about the whole concept of the thing. So if I may, Chair, make a suggestion, I would like to be as bold as to suggest that is actually a high risk issue in relation to the plan, the infrastructure delivery plan not being met by the funds.
Noted. Councillor Harvey, I understand you have a comment.
Thank you, Chair. The question I'd just like to ask, I appreciate in the same page that Councillor Parker was referring to, we identify in this report the £48 million shortfall between SIL and expectation. The really useful documentation that was previously produced with the IDB plan identified specific costings against specific projects. I'd love to see an update of that, please, if possible. Obviously, there's the online version and the online elements. If that's the up-to-date, that's fine. If there's a more up-to-date version of that, as a council, I think I'm sure colleagues would, I'd appreciate seeing that to better understand the current position of specifically where the shortfall rests. And if it's more general than that, then again, I'd appreciate understanding that. I do appreciate the point about viability, and I appreciate the point about affordable housing. And I think the interesting thing is we've got an existing situation where a lot of those developments have gone through the planning process already. And Councillor James's point about the 20% is very valid, set against the overall number of units that will then be being delivered. And a lot of those developers have already used their existing viability policies to get out of delivering the affordable housing to a certain extent. They've used it as arguments. And also, they're not making SIL contributions because they've gone through the existing process, haven't they? They haven't been subjected to SIL, and they will not be subjected to SIL. So, Mark, as part of this, and officers completely in the team, really, I'm just looking to, and you're not going to do this now, but I would appreciate a better understanding of the current 106 to SIL relationship in the context of the sites that you're promoting, Kennel Farm, Raises Farm, all of those others that have gone through, and where those sites are then addressing the strategic need. Again, that relates to the first point of where the funding gap is. I want to try to understand where the real picture is, not just the simple one that's being expressed, forgive me, in the officer report, which I respect as a summary of a much bigger picture, a much more detailed picture. If you can help me understand that, not necessarily in this meeting this evening, but outside of here, I would appreciate it. Because my concern is that even on those Section 106s, for example, on Kennel, and on the golf club and some of the others as they come through, it's not going to meet the need, for example, the amount of money that would be required to spend on Kempshot roundabout, for example, to achieve the transport solutions that has been talked about. And again, that's just one example of a much broader issue, I think.
If I could just come back on the roundabout example. When you look at the mitigation proposed in the IDP and the transport assessment, that is looking at the situation in 2029, taking into account what's happening with the baseline traffic increasing year on year, in addition to things happening in our neighbouring authorities and traffic arising from developments there, in addition to traffic arising just from the local plan. We can't attribute all of the cost of the improvements to mitigate that level of development, that quantum of development, just on the proposals coming forward in our local plan. You can only mitigate for what impact they have. So I don't want to mislead my members and get them create the wrong impression that all of the costs set out in the IDP will necessarily be met by the development coming forward locally. We will need to seek funding from outside of the borough, the LEP, for example, and that's the approach we've taken so far.
Thank you. That kind of underlines, and thanks Mark, that underlines really with the importance of the question really then, because yes, of course that's a given, but the percentage that's actually coming out of some of these developments is so low in comparison to what we might have had we had SIL in place. I mean, they've been clever. They've got through the process and got through the system quickly on the basis of getting out of this to a certain extent, in my personal view. And the implication of that is, okay, so we need to go to government and we need to go to the LEP and we need to go to county to find more money to pay for the combined authority agenda and the other conversations that we're having around much higher growth and much higher accelerated housing delivery to get money to pay for an infrastructure guarantee or to have an infrastructure guarantee. The quid pro quo that's being talked about places even more pressure on the situation, or it will do, and yet we haven't solved the existing situation. It's almost as if, and for me, it's a compounding of the problem. And I don't think we're going to solve this. I don't believe there is a solution out there because of the way that this whole situation has been generated. But why I'd like to see the detail is to understand in particular areas where the real choke points are, where the real issue of an infrastructure deficit is going to present itself. And I think the information you gave us before was incredibly helpful in seeing that picture. I'd just like to see an updated version of that, and I really would appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Officers have indicated that they will be able to provide that when?
Yeah, I mean, this was obviously just an update report, and I think when we come back with the charging schedule, that's probably the time to produce the updated IDP. As you say, it's an ongoing document. I think the version you've seen previously is the latest published version. Yeah.
Councillor Mr. James.
Can I refer to page 18 of 97, the equalities, 6.13. In it you say there's no specific equalities impact assessment has been undertaken. Should we not have done an equalities impact assessment in relation to this, in relation to SIL? And why haven't we? I don't understand why we haven't got an equalities impact assessment. That's my first.
I think it's safe to say that the policy and the plan, which SIL is more or less attached to, the infrastructure policy, has been through an equalities impact assessment, as has the whole local plan itself. So it falls within that realm.
Is it possible for you to send that to me so I can have a look at it, please?
It's on our website, so I can send you a link to it. It's quite a chunky document. So.
Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. Supporting particularly the comments by Councillor Harvey, and certainly our experience in our ward is that the developers will take every opportunity to reduce the affordable housing element in the developments, regardless of size. My suggestion is that it would be more relevant and realistic under paragraph 611, where it reads on the third line, the amount of affordable housing to be provided may be reduced. I think perhaps there would be a more honest wording that would be is likely to be reduced.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that the concerns about affordable housing have to be paramount, and I mean it's a nationwide issue. It's a concern of everybody, and I don't think that we in Basingstoke Borough must leave any indication to any developer before we've even started at the negotiation table that we're contemplating preparing to consider less than our policy stipulates. And we've been down this road before when we had debates in full chamber on the Many Down, and I would disagree with Councillor Parker. I would not say it's likely to be reduced. I think we should just have be reduced, removed, because I think it's essential that we are really on top of and ensuring that the 40% minimum is delivered, and we are on top of developers who are extremely clever, and I've heard them on the Today programme boasting about the fact that they can, with creative accounting, make a development seem non-viable. I've heard a very senior, I can't remember which building company, saying you can make any development non-viable through fancy accounting. So I know that Mark's mentioned that we're going to have a third party. I hope the third party is a highly competent, highly forensic accountancy firm who's going to make sure for the interests of our residents and the need for affordable... No. So, district order.
Yes, comment to. I'd like you to put just the comments to officers, please, because this is the way that we conduct the committees. Back to this document, and if you want to fire a comment into anybody, could you make it to the officers? That's okay. Don't worry.
Well, Chair, I think it's only reasonable. I've had a fellow committee member sort of talk against what I've myself mentioned, and I would like just to counteract that by, I would totally agree, Councillor Cubitt, if this was wording inside of some other document, but this is particularly highlighting a risk. Again, this is the risk of us accepting the sort of the documentation is being presented to us. That risk is, fact that we know is that the direction we're travelling towards is that the element of affordable housing is likely to be reduced. I would much rather go with what you're saying if it was enforceable, but I don't believe it's enforceable. And Chair, I just have one other light-hearted point to raise, if I may, and I do say that if I had time to have approached officers before, I certainly would have done, but if we look at the recommendation on paragraph 12, I'm sure it isn't meant to read these rates should not threaten the viability of sites and other development conning forward through the local plan. Or it might be, but I would suggest coming is the, there's a typing error there.
An unfortunate one, I quite agree. I noticed it when I read the paper. Do the officers, have they taken that on board about the comments about this viability question? Perfectly understood, and the comment is taken. Any other comments? Fine, thank you. That's paper B. we can go on to the review of the work programme. In paper D, the meeting this evening, the update report, cycling strategy, we've done that. Now, it's my understanding that on the 26th of November, the flood prevention, that Tom Payne is going to be presenting that? Yes? Now, I'm going to turn to the Vice Chair in a second. The pollution monitoring of the River Loddon, do you have a statement on this one, Jill, that you would like to let the committee know?
No, I mean, just to inform members that there was a briefing note requested, and that was circulated to all members. I don't have anything more to add to that at this stage. Thank you.
Okay, because we know that there will be more questions coming out about that particular subject in the examination. It's identified in the programme, and the Vice Chair, in fact, will be addressing the inspector during that. As been mentioned already, the 21st of January is the updated draft for the SILS charging schedule. There's a nod from my left. That's all that we have on that January meeting at the moment. We have nothing for March. It's sort of in the future. I'm going to advise the committee that EPH, we deal with policies on planning. And just to let you know that there's a possibility we may call extraordinary meetings of this committee as a result of whatever comes out of the examination of the local plan. I've got some time away booked, but I don't think it's going to come up before then. But we'd just be prepared. You know, there might be extraordinary ones to come in if we had to examine any particular policies of the local plan as a result of the examination. I have no idea what they might be. But if they're under the terms of reference of this committee, it'll come back to us. Yes? Items to be timetabled. Got a fair old list here. I'd just like to quickly go through these. Commissioning. There's an output we're expecting from the scrutiny committee. Will drive the content of this particular item and the timing of that particular subject back to us here. I haven't seen anything out of scrutiny at the moment, and the officers have yet to advise me about timing, but these are our markers that we place in the items to be timetabled. Homelessness, that's one that's ongoing, and the officers will advise me when they're ready to bring it back to the committee here. As you can see, we've got a couple of slots available in the future meetings that we can do that. Tendering and contracts. I think I mentioned this at the last committee on July 23rd, that will be a full all-members briefing because it's of interest to all members as opposed to the members just of this committee, and save a double whammy of passing on information that the tendering and contracts officers will be presenting that, presumably, on a session in the chamber. I haven't got a timetable for that yet, but as timetables come out, I'll make sure that you get advised. Housing strategy. I'm always advised by Kate that that is an ongoing process. As soon as I'm advised that there's any significant changes to the housing strategy, it will be coming back. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Rolling in 4 and 5 together in the context of the housing strategy and the Council's approach to housing. It's my understanding that officers have advised the portfolio holder who is considering a direction of travel to go in on this. I think in terms of the task and finish panel that was set up, but also the housing strategy, awaiting her decision on the way she'd like to take things. Once that's established, I think we can address how to approach the housing strategy. And it's not just the right to buy, there's a number of other elements that fall out of conversations with housing associations in our area, but nonetheless the conglomerate of all of that will be directed hopefully by the Cabinet member once she's had a chance to consider the direction of travel. And I'm hoping that will involve us in this committee and will involve a task and finish panel. I think that would be an appropriate way forward, but that's for the Cabinet member to consider. But we await, I think, and it's one of those wait and see.
Thank you. You, in fact, were nominated as the lead for a scoping group. Did anything come of that?
Yes, that, in the sense that that is where, at the moment, the Cabinet member needs to consider, I think, direction of travel on the housing strategy, direction of travel with, and it encompasses all of this, including the homeless bit that you've just mentioned, but particularly in regard to the implications on our housing associations. So, in many ways, the ball is in the Cabinet member's court, and she will direct the travel, I imagine, and then we will decide as a committee, of course, to react to that.
The scoping group was part of this committee, not the portfolio holder. What happened to the scoping group?
I met with the chief executive, who asked us to look at not taking that forward in light of a review of the housing strategy, and that piece of work is they're looking at the cabinet member, and we've made a commitment as a Labour group to support that piece of work, and they're looking at this piece of work going forward in reviewing all of the housing strategy in the future. So we've dropped the piece of work in light of being asked to do so while it's on hold. We're happy to pick up again, but in light of this piece of work, which I think, and we've always historically said, how important it is that we review the housing strategy. It's really not fit for purpose, and we need to have something that is, and so we're very committed to that, and we're very happy to work with the cabinet member on doing this piece of work. Yeah.
You might be happy, but you went round me, and as far as I know, you went round the portfolio holder. If you were talking to the chief executive about what goes on in this committee, I would have considered it, how can I put it, protocol to actually advise me what was going on, because this is the first I've heard of it.
I'm surprised that you weren't. I didn't raise the subject. I didn't have the meeting with the chief executive. He raised this issue with me, and I know that discussion and work is going on with the cabinet member, and I would have assumed that she would have updated you as the chair. I wasn't meeting with him to discuss this issue, but you need to raise that with the cabinet member.
Thank you for the advice, I will. Right, empty shop units in Basingstoke town. That's something that we need to put forward. I'm not sure how we're going to go about that. I'm rather inclined to find out, again, we need a scoping group to identify what is going to be proposed. If I get suggestions of these particular items to go on here, then whoever suggests it needs to get involved in a scoping group so we know what is the breadth of the subject and who we're going to address it to, together with the officers. I think it's a very valid one, personally, because there's too many in town. Councillor Mrs. James.
On that one, we sent as a Labour group in the scoping document that you meant to send in. We sent that to Stefan to do that piece of work. So we were asked to outline what we want to see from that, and we did send in the pro forma that you're meant to fill in.
Okay, Julia's not aware of that form coming in. We will check with Stefan. But can you resend it, please? Because without those suggestion forms coming in, we've got no idea. We've got a topic line, we don't know what to do with it. Councillor Parker.
As ward member for the East Rock Ward Town Centre, I consider I have a particular interest in this, and so if there's any work to be done in terms of scoping, I have to say I think I would like to put on record that it does actually cause me concern where there seems to be a trend to introduce the issue of empty units in the top of town on a quite regular basis. In fact, the experience in the top of town is considerably strong, and it doesn't help those traders, those retailers who've continued to try and give a shopping proposition to residents and visitors when we continually bang on. Maybe we could modify our language in sometimes when we speak about it in council. I hope the point's taken, and maybe we can actually perhaps address this by looking at shop units in Basingstoke Town. I don't know quite what you're hoping to gain from this piece of work. Perhaps someone let me know.
Councillor James,
As ward member.
Councillor James is the one that initiated this. It certainly didn't come from me. So this is why it's so important that if anybody raises any of these topics, we're quite happy it comes within the remit of this committee, is they feed it to committee services. And then we circulate it. Anybody who wants to get involved in this, you're not a regular member of the committee, but certainly you're on the reserve list, I believe. Yes. Yeah, then you would be canvassed as to want to get involved in it. Obviously very pertinent because it's your ward. And then that's what the scoping group is all about, is to look at what is the, under what context the suggestion has been put forward. And I agree, it can be modified, but that's the whole point of the scoping group, to actually pinpoint what is the issue. If it's just shop units in general, that makes a lot of sense.
Yes, I'm a registered sub. That's why I'm able to sub. And as a registered sub, like Julia, I haven't seen anything circulated regarding this item.
The officer just said, as soon as she gets hold of this, she'll distribute it to everybody. That's our normal practice anyway, as soon as we get these suggestions. Okay? New welfare reforms. This, again, is awaiting guidance to councils, borough councils, county councils, everybody else, of exactly what is going on. It's a topic that we will need to address later on. I'm not quite sure if it's this committee. It might be CEP. I just don't know yet, until we know what the reforms are coming down the pipe. This council, I'm advised by officers, has yet to receive any directives. Councillor James.
Again, I know that Cabinet members and officers have met with housing associations. We've also, as an opposition, met with housing associations to talk about the impact of some of the welfare reforms. One that I think is really important that we do understand, and we should have some of our key partners in to talk to us, to explain to us, and how it might influence, for example, SIL, or how it might influence the delivery of affordable housing, is some of those changes. Is the 23% cap on housing benefit, and in talking to Sentinel, we're talking about there's going to be 1,000 people, households that are going to be affected by that, and there are lots of concerns that they have, and it's going to impact on the delivery of affordable housing. We've seen sites across the borough at the moment that have been pulled, and we only saw one this week in Chinham House that's been pulled. So there's going to be lots and lots of sites that are going to be pulled because they can't afford to deliver them. And I think it's essential that we get our partners in to talk to us and for us to hear, because we haven't heard it. I know that the executive and our officers have heard that, but I think that we ought to understand what the implications are, because they're far-reaching, and some of our partners have actually ceased developing because of the impact of these reforms. So I think it's really important at the earliest opportunity, and I'd like to make the recommendation on the meeting of the 26th, that we ask the partners to come along just to talk to us about the implications of some of these changes so we can understand them.
I'm going to repeat what I said earlier. There is a mechanism of how we engaged in this committee. If you submit the paperwork through committee services, then they can engage with the officers, the portfolio holder, myself, and we can schedule it at the appropriate time. But until we get the information of what the interest is from the members of the committee, this is how these committees work these days, we don't know where to start, and I'm certainly not going to schedule something for some time in the future when we don't know what we're doing, and what the work has to be done by the officers. We can't do it that way.
I'm not actually asking for any work to be done by officers. What I'm saying is we've got a slot at the moment on the 26th, and is it the wish of the committee that we ask the housing associations, the two, maybe even the two key ones, to come in to talk to us, so we have an opportunity to ask them some questions around these changes and how it's going to impact on our housing strategy and policy. I just think it would be, because this has happened elsewhere, why would we not want to do that? And I think I can fill in a pro forma, but I'm asking you as a committee to have this debate with me now. Do you think it's a wise thing that we do?
I agree with the principle, but we have to go through a process here. I'm not going for a free-for-all in this committee. It's as simple as that. Councillor Richards.
I mean, I take your point, and nothing against it. But I would see this as a bigger issue, though. Is this not a members' briefing issue?
Yes,
Yeah?
that's what I was going to say.
And if there are other executives involved in this, I'm certainly not going to undermine them. So there's a procedure of how to get these topics onto the work programme. Please follow it. If there's nothing else, I close the meeting at 8:40. Thank you.